So I was in the red. I was very deep in the hole um, of my sales quota, my sales target. I just sort of finished school a couple of years ago. I graduated from university, gone to a great business school, but the roles that I thought I would be happy at, I wasn't. I wasn't actually happy at. So, in a moment of sort of not knowing what to do, I took on a sales job. And I was working for a very large logistics company. I was going and selling these logistics solutions to businesses in Toronto at that time. So medium-sized businesses who I was selling these services to, and I had around $500,000 to $1 million worth of like business that I was managing and bringing in, and all of that kind of stuff. I don't remember the exact amount. What I do remember is we were going through much of the year, and it turned out that I was off by $60,000. So I had to make up between sixty to $80,000 of business in a very short amount of time. And if you know anything about selling like complex solutions, you know that this is almost impossible, because when you're selling something complex, it takes months and months to sell something, and then for that client to start producing and using your services to fill that gap, it takes an incredibly long amount of time. um, I'd just gotten out of like half a year before this. I'd just gotten out of their training program in a very short amount of time. um, it turned out that it was the shortest amount of time anyone had ever gotten out of the training program and become this executive key account executive. So I was in this very kind of tricky place. I had to kind of prove myself, and I didn't know what to do. And what everyone told me to do, and what I would see colleagues do at work, is that they would go sit in that's a plane flying out. Um, they would go sit in a room, and they would open up the yellow pages or something equivalent to it. They would open up the CRM, and they would look at every single business in their territory and just spend all day calling, dial after dial after dial. And I tried that approach, and it just wasn't working for me. And so I tried something which was very different at that time. What I did was that um, I decided to, and I to this day I don't understand why I chose to do this, but I sort of just had this feeling that I have to do it this way. Is I went off into the park. I would, instead of going into the office, or instead of going visiting clients, knocking on doors, that type of thing, I ended up going to a coffee shop. I would end up going to a park. Like there was a coffee shop and a park sort of next to each other. So I would just spend 2 or 3 days I just spent in that coffee shop and park. And I was fully in a suit. I had my laptop. I was still replying to emails that clients were sending me, that sort of thing. And I just got, and I just started to journal. I just started to write and write and write. I started to write up every single reason why I thought this was impossible. And as these reasons would come up, I would accept it, and I would sort of let it go. I would let it fly away. And I did this for literally 2 days in a row. And all these ideas came up, that there's no way you can make this gap. You're going to lose this job. Everything's going to fall apart, like blah, blah, blah. All of these ideas kept swimming in my head. And at the end of these 2 days of me just going to a park, coffee store, and just doing this type of journaling activity, um, I felt good. I felt okay. I felt like everything was going to work out. And I don't quite know like what changed inside of me, but just that sitting and writing that thing process worked out. So anyways, day 3 comes along, and I have to go visit a client. And I so go to this office complex, and I've been to this office complex dozens of times. And I go visit my client. We have a nice meeting, and just through like sheer intuition, I see an office door that I've passed by like hundreds of times or dozens of times. I choose to knock on that door. Now, like, you know how awkward it can get to like solicit business cold like that, but I just had this feeling. And so I knocked on this door. I hadn't knocked on any other door that day or that week, actually. I just knocked on that door, and I went to the front desk, and the lady, and I tell her that, I'm from so-and-so company, and we do logistics and all of this kind of stuff. Do you guys need something like this? And she told me that, you know what, we have just raised over $1 million on Kickstarter, and we have all of these, that's with the plane to go away. And she said, we really need to ship all of these different things that we have, that we need to ship out, and we need to do it in the next 30 days. And let me get you talking with the vice president right away, who's in charge of all this. And so in the span of just that afternoon, I ended up meeting the leadership of that company. And then a week later, we had a signed agreement. And then a month later, I was there literally watching them ship off all of these units across the globe using a very expensive service that we had at that time, and me filling my entire quota in the span of like a month. And I was blown away by that. And I have realized that this process of creating your life has worked for me so many times. And it's a process that I'm rediscovering again in my 30s as I'm setting out and doing my own businesses. I'm working and building things for my own. Every time I sit down and I choose to let go of all of these ideas that I have in my head about here's how you need to do things, the easier life gets. But we're not taught to think like that, right? We're taught to think that, well, results come from like using your brain very intently. Like, you have to figure things out. And the more you try and figure things out, the better the outcome is going to be. But my experience has told me that every time I've been in a very tight hole, and by the way, I've been in these tight situations based on the work of my mind, right? Your mind tells you, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to plan this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And I'm someone who read all of those dozens of business best-selling books. I would read strategy books and sales books and this, that, and the other, and entrepreneurship books. I would took classes in entrepreneurship. And none of that helped. None of that made sense. None of that worked for me. It wasn't until I was able to let go and let my intuition take over that I was able to create with so much more ease. And results would just sort of flow to me. And I felt really woo-woo even like talking about these sorts of things back in my 20s. But now that I'm in my 30s, I just want to come out and like talk about these ideas a lot more confidently. Because if you're out there, you're building a business by yourself, you're trying to sell something by yourself, you're trying to figure it out on what to do next. I think what we need is to step away from like, trying to use our brain and thinking that like if we can just logic our way out of a problem or a situation. And instead, I think what we need to do is learn to let go of the limitations we put in our mind. We learn to let go of these this idea that the brain will help us solve everything, because the brain can't. In fact, if you look at story upon stories of so many geniuses across history, they've had their deepest realizations in a moment of complete relaxation, in a moment where they've completely let go of trying to figure it out. It's like Albert Einstein would have his deepest insights when he was dreaming or daydreaming. We've heard about Thomas Edison, who would take micro naps just to figure out. We hear so many stories of people who would take long walks and strolls in nature to get out of their head, right? Like that's what they would do. They would just sort of like ruminate on things and just sort of let go, and things would happen. And so I want to share with you kind of what I've been doing recently to let go, to shut off my brain and let this intuition guide me a lot more. And I decided to make this video outside in this little park area in my building with my feet on the ground. Like I literally have my feet sort of on the grass as opposed to wearing my shoes, because I think we need to be a lot more grounded in nature. So I have 3 ideas for you today that I hope can help you out to help you get out of your head and solve big problems in your life, create, etc. Number 1, I think journaling and morning pages. I've talked about this in the past, but this idea of sitting down in the morning, or really any time, because right now I sort of do them any time in the day, and just downloading everything that's in your head and putting it on a paper without any censorship, right? Like I'm not stopping, I'm not pausing, I'm just writing for 3 pages in a row, and insights are coming up for me. And that's like, I don't know how to do it, but I think my brain kind of shuts down, and it doesn't happen when I type, right? I have to write it with my hand. My brain just sort of shuts down, and like this other voice starts to speak, and I'm able to write it all down. The second thing that I try and do a lot more is spending time in silence, right? So spending time in quiet contemplation. I've actually reduced the number of podcasts and books that I read and listen to, and I'm now down to just very few things that I listen to, read regularly. Another plane. What a beautiful day, right? Um, um, Spending time in nature, spending time outside has been such a cathartic experience. I think like moments of great progress that I've ever had have come when I've turned off the stimulus from the outside world, because I'm willing to bet that you already know what you have to do, right? Like there's no new tactic, there's no new a technique that you need to learn. You already know everything that's out there. And if you don't, you can go on ChatGPT, you can go on Google, you can search something up, you can find how-tos. The real thing that keeps us stuck are the limitations that we keep in our head, the feeling of blockage, the lack of courage, the lack of belonging, the lack of feeling safe, like all of these, the lack of approval, these sorts of feelings that we have inside of us that keep us stuck. Those are the things that keep us not moving forward. And I think when we spend time in nature, all of those voices tend to subside substantially, and we can create a lot more freely. And so silence, morning pages, and I think the number 3 thing is the act of letting go. The more we choose to let go, right? And I think it's almost like picking something up. So like, I've got a leaf in my hand right here, and quite often what we end up doing is that we take something and we say, I hate this, I can't have this, I'm so stuck with this problem, and we're just grasping it tighter and tighter and tighter in our hands. But if we just say, you know what, I'm choosing to let this go, it just sort of falls away a lot more easily. We don't have to think so deeply about holding on to it, right? Like it's so easy to let go, but we make this into this complicated ritualistic process where like we have to process it, we have to spend so much time like efforting against it, but all we're doing is just grasping it tighter and tighter and end up like hurting our own hands by the act of doing it. So anyways, I hope these ideas actually help you. One of the things that I want to try and do this month is bring more people into this community. I am not someone who has it all figured out. I'm still trying to figure my way out towards the kind of success that I want. I am trying to build towards something, but I think a lot of us right now are trying to build something. We're figuring out that the industrial way of working no longer serves us. It's going to leave us behind. This idea of AI and automation, all of these sorts of things, people are using that as an excuse to fire most people, right? They're using that as an excuse to let a lot of people go. There's a lot of disruption happening. And what I'm finding out is that the only game left to play in town is for us to go out there and create our own futures, for us to find our own communities, and for us to go out there and do this ourselves. And it's not about more skills, right? There are tons of online courses that you can take to learn a micro skill about. Like, here's how you set up a Shopify site, or here's how you do AWS or AI, like prompt engineering, all these sorts of things. But I think what we need is a community of practice, a place where we can practice showing up, a place where we can practice being courageous, being generous, helping one another, growing in our relationships. When you leave university, when you leave college, most of us don't have that anymore. And so we need a place where people actually feel good about showing up, helping one another, and setting goals and cheering each other on to create these sorts of things. So look for that in the coming weeks, but I'm excited to launch that. But I've been guided a lot by intuition to do all of that and create these sorts of things. So just lean a lot more into your intuition, and I think wonderful things can happen. That's what I'm finding out about from reading so many biographies, reading so many stories, and from my own personal experience. I just shared one example with you, but I've had dozens of experiences where when I've been put in a corner and I haven't quite known what to do next, it's my intuition. When I've chosen to let go and intuition speaks up, where the right answer, the right options, the right opportunities, the right people end up flowing into my life. So thank you so much, and I will see you next time. And if you have any questions or comments about this, or any things that you want me to cover in future videos, let me know. Thanks.